Hello everyone, glad to have you here. If this is your first time, don't forget to subscribe. It helps me bring you more stories like this. Now get comfortable. It's time to dive into the story Los Angeles Zombie Outbreak, high school survivor's story. Now, let's get started. I didn't plan to be the last one left at John Marshall High. I was supposed to be home on Rowena by 5, running cables for a weekend live stream job and arguing with my mum about whether I should drop physics for film in the fall. But the day the city changed, I stayed late to fix a dimmer rack in the auditorium, missed the early dismissal stampede, and watched the gates click shut behind a wave of tail lights, while the sky over Losius went from ordinary blue to the strange brownish haze that comes when too many sirens crisscross the basin at once. I'm Mateo Alvarez, senior AV lead in the auditorium. The kid teaches text when the projector won't handshakes with an HDMI switch. My mum is a nurse at Kaiser Permanente on Sunset. My dad, when he calls, still asks whether the old Metro Division 2 yard on San Fernando smells like oil, like when he worked swinging shift there. Even before the broadcast said the word infection, the city had that electrical static feeling you get before an earthquake. Dogs barking at odd hours, helicopters tilting and hovering too long, neighbors arguing in hushed voices that carried in the heat. At 2:38 p.m., my phone vibrated with the county alert. Shelter indoors. A minute later, Principal Lafetti broke onto the intercom with a voice that wanted to sound calm and landed somewhere near winded. Staff, follow your incident binders. Teachers dismissed by staggered corridor. Parents, pickup location is Tracy and St. George. Students, you will be accompanied to the gates by staff. A lot of us have grown up under the flicker of incident binders, earthquake drills, lockdown, baignoire, rills, reunification sites printed on pale green cardstock. For 5 minutes, campus moved like muscle memory. For the rest of it, everything behaved like the wrong kind of dream. I was in the wings of the John Marshall Auditorium, back by the costume closet and the heavy drapes that always smell a little like dust and stage paint. I had a dimmer pulled, fuses fanned on a shelf, and my hoodie tied around my waist in what felt like a normal problem to solve. The alerts kept vibrating. A group of dance team kids went by with their bags banging their legs. Miss Delgado, who teaches media, stuck her head in the proscenium and said, "Mateo, shut down what you can and go. We're evacuating by the main gate." I told her I was 5 minutes behind. She gave me the look teachers give seniors who pretend this is their school and not theirs. Then she moved on. 5 minutes became 10. The power flickered once and the house lights dipped. I closed the rack, killed the stage circuits at the wall, and packed the auditorium keyring. Our ring, the one the theatre kids shared, not the master keys. It could open both sound booths, backstage storage, and the catwalk ladder cage. It in no way prepared me for being the only one left. When I stepped into the late afternoon light, the quad was nearly empty. A custodian, I think it was Mr. Flores by the way he walked, but he was far away, was wheeling a bin toward the cafeteria. 2 security aides hustled a straggler toward the St. George gate. I could hear the city pressing in. Horns along Glendale Boulevard, a helicopter doing a slow orbit above the reservoir. A distant tone that might have been another school's bells fighting with the radio chatter in my pocket. I headed for the exit and stopped. Beyond the chain link, Tracy Street was a tangle. Cars angled up onto sidewalks, someone leaning into a minivan window and shouting, 2 separate sets of parents, TS, trying to hug their kids and move them at the same time. Out on Hyperion, sirens ran in both directions, and a city bus sat in the intersection with its hazards pecking at the widening afternoon. My mum texted, "Kaiser on lockdown, stay where you are, can't leave. Love you, don't make noise after dark." I typed, "I'm coming," and didn't send it. Road space is a fantasy once it fills with fear. The campus, for all the jokes we make about how easy it is to hop a fence, is one of the few places in this neighborhood designed to hold people safely. We've got perimeter fencing, a couple of buildings with only a handful of entrances, hallway doors with crash bars that lock from the outside, fire sprinklers, bottled water, earthquake bins with those silver blankets that feel like candy wrap. The worst things usually come from outside, and the best place to be was inside. The St. George gate clicked shut. Security walked it and tugged the chain like they were trying to pull the whole of Los Angeles a little tighter. For one hanging breath, I nearly called out, but one of the aides was talking into his radio in that voice meant to sound casual for scared kids standing nearby, and saying, "We're clear," became a ritual, the last sentence of the days-old script. They rolled the traffic gate closed, hung the lock, and left. And I did nothing at all but breathe and listen to my heartbeat until I could hear the clock in my head tick off, the seconds since I had ceased to be anyone's responsibility except my own. Hour 02. I made a plan that wasn't really a plan. Stay to the interior, keep the buildings between me and the street, and think like a custodian. The campus we know as students is a surface. Under that, it's boiler rooms, alarm panels, and the tiny office behind the nurse's door where the good bandages live. I jogged to the nurse's office off the main hall and found the door open. On the counter, a bin of surgical masks, a manual blood pressure cuff, a box of nitrile gloves. I took 2 N95s that were in a dusty sleeve labelled smoke event. I grabbed a small bottle of antiseptic, rolled an ace wrap into my backpack, and checked the tiny fridge, insulin vials, ice packs, nothing else. I didn't take any of that. We might need it. The main office was locked. The admin building with that arched entry and the flagpole out front looked like a place where decisions lived. A little further out, the science building shadows held still in the late afternoon heat. The smell of asphalt coming up like summer though it wasn't. I cut across to the cafeteria because I knew the side door near the loading dock stuck on hot afternoons. You didn't need tricks for it, just patience and a certain push from the bottom with your shoulder. It stuck. I pushed. It opened. Inside, I stood in the quiet and watched the thin red line on a Pepsi machine scroll diag steps. Beyond the serving line, the kitchen separated into stations, walk-in fridge, stovetops under big hoods, dry storage with bulk bags of rice and flour, and 10 cans of peaches. I didn't want to steal food. Steal from who? But I stopped being picky about language. I stacked 2 flats of bottled water on a cart, added a smaller box of granola bars and rolled it toward the service corridor that links the admin hallway and the back of house spaces. I left the cart in the auditorium wing and took a second one to the library. A good vantage on the quad, windows high enough to be safe, stacks that could be shifted to make a narrow passageway if I needed a funnel to slow anything dangerous. On the way back, I found a charging brick in a lost and found bin along with 2 cracked phone cases and a scarf. I plugged my phone into the Barco projector's power strip long enough to nudge the battery towards 60%. I printed a note on a scrap of butcher paper. Inside, safe, secure, go home if you can. And I taped it on the inside of the glass doors facing the quad. It felt stupid, it felt smart, it felt like a kinda F prayer. Outside the main gate, a car horn blared and stuck. Someone smacked it into silence. A helicopter passed low toward Griffith Park. A woman shouted a name, Mateo, for a split second, and it wasn't me. I put on the N95, not because of illness yet, but because of smoke. If there were too many small fires in too many places, the basin would hold it like a bowl. I wedged the library door with a rubber chalk and got to work on the basics. Water, light, doors. Hour 26. If campus security ever wonders how kids learn the building, the answer is that teachers show us the right parts and time shows us the rest. The auditorium's scene shop had a crowbar and a battered red Magite. The backstage storage had a case of Dells from the last time we ran a blackout scene and forgot to kill the lamps. The athletic office had a battered handheld radio in a charging cradle. Motorola CP200, our campus model, a laminated channel plan, and a note whose permanence I didn't like. If staff notified to evacuate, leave radios in cradles for emergency use. I left the radio in its dock until sunset. Power still fed the lines. The clock still ran. The bells didn't ring. Someone in admin had silenced them. And that meant whoever controlled the school clock system had time to turn off the bell schedule, which meant the last minutes before everything got loud were for someone sent where they should go. That quiet mattered more to me than the rest. I moved through the admin wing, checking the crash bars on the doors. They locked as designed, openable from the inside, firm from the outside. In a locked classroom, a chair wedged under a knob is security theatre. In a public building with fire codes, the real safety is already hit. You just have to believe in the geometry. I avoided the big glass where the courtyard gives you away and stayed to the internal corridors. On the band room door, I left a note for Nick from percussion. Stay home, dude. Because it felt like the kind of thing you do when you still live in a world where jokes translate. At 5:22, my phone buzzed with a message from Lena. Are you still at school? Go home. They blocked Rowena by the reservoir. People are panicking at Trader Joe's. I typed, I'm in the library, and deleted it. She sent a photo of Glendale Blevitt with hazard lights blinking all the way to the bridge. I started to type again and stopped when a noise, like a metal trash can falling over, came from the courtyard. I crouched at the library window and peered out through a gap in the blinds. The courtyard looked the same. Concrete, planters, the school mascot painted on a wall, but there was a movement at the far end by the admin building where the sidewalk curves toward the flagpole. A person. Two, they moved like someone walking too fast in a space not meant for it. Not exactly running, but never settling into a speed a body likes. One of them, a man in a blue dress shirt and dark pants, bumped the flagpole with his shoulder and tilted, then corrected like the world was turning under him wrong. It's hard to describe a kind of motion without making it sound more monstrous than it is. I've watched my mum do end-of-shift walk, and it's a motion you read without thinking. Purposeful, tired, entirely human. The people in the courtyard moved like they were being pulled by an idea they couldn't understand, and though I didn't yet want to name it, my brain refused to file it anywhere else. But under the new word, everyone was trying not to say aloud, infected. I ducked my head below the window line and backed away from the glass. I switched the library lights off, even though the windows were already filtering everything into safe dimness. I breathed quietly in a place where you could hear your own breath. And for a long minute I was a kid again during a lockdown drill, listening to a teacher whisper that the person walking down the hall cannot come in, even if they knock in Talboat, the right way, even if they say a name we know. Later, the scanner app on my phone said things I wish it had never learned to say. Code 7s where there shouldn't be. Requests for additional units that went unanswered. EMS dispatchers telling crews to stage blocks away because scenes couldn't be secured. But in that first early evening on campus, I had nothing but the simple physics of doors and glass, and the way sound travels across a courtyard and up into a library that smells like dust and paper, and all the hours kids have hidden there from themselves. When the two figures reached the main office doors and pushed at them with open hands, the crash bars didn't give because they only give to those inside. They shoved and pounded and made a noise like someone trying to wake up a locked building, then staggered back toward the quad and peered into the library like they could feel eyes more keenly than they could see through glass. I held still and learned not to breathe for a count of 40, then 60, then until they left their reflections behind and moved down the shadowed hall, vanishing toward the cafeteria where I had not properly locked that side door because I was thinking like a passenger and not like crew. I waited. When the sound had bled out into the city's larger soundscape, I slipped into the hall, moved at a crouch, and retreated toward the auditorium wing with the feeling of playing at a game where the rules are new and people you love haven't yet been told they're playing. I tugged the cafeteria door and found it shut because of heat expansion again, and I locked it in the only way I had with an industrial zip tie from the scene shop, looped through the crash bar in the meanest imitation of policy. It wasn't regulation, it wasn't good, it was what I had. Hour 6:12. I decided on a headquarters, the library study room tucked in the back corner with a window toward the student store and the main quad, busy, at only 2 interior walls of glass. I disassembled a rolling whiteboard and leaned it inside the study room door as a simple motion trigger. If someone opened the door from the hall, the board would fall and bang the floor. And although that wasn't a defense, it was a sentence of advance notice. I stacked 2 low shelves to make a blind in front of the study room window so nobody could look in and see movement without pressing their face to the glass. I dragged the cart of water inside and set 3 bottles in different places in the room like you put lamps in a house so it feels lived in. I ate 2 granola bars and forced another one down because people forget to eat when they work on tunnel problem. I texted my mum again and said I'm on campus, safe. Do not come. She replied with a blue bubble I read and reread until it became nothing more than pixels. I can't leave. I see you overflow. Stay put. I love you. Turn off the bells in the morning. They'll draw people. I thought about the main clock panel where exactly I couldn't know, but I knew the bell controllers live near the admin office in a unit with a tiny LED display and a manufacturer name like Primex or American Time. I wasn't going to break into anything. If it was locked, it stayed locked. But if someone had left the admin's inner hall door or jar in the exodus, I'd look. There's a line you learn to walk in a school, what counts as helping and what counts as trespass. I measured the line with the fact that every building in this city belongs in a crisis to all of us. I slept for maybe 20 minutes around midnight, my back to a shelf of literature anthologies with tape-repaired spines. I woke to a thud that wasn't the city. When you sit in the same room for a while, you learn its acoustics. You know when a sound is inside your space or bouncing from outside. This came from the hall. The whiteboard had not fall. The thud came again, like someone testing a door with their shoulder. I rolled quietly from the chair and put my ear to the floor like a movie cliché and listened through concrete to the building's structural bones. It was somewhere beyond the library. A hallway to the econ rooms. Maybe it came a 3rd time, and then a dragging sound, and then a soft, rhythmic tap that could have been knuckles or the end of a ruler. I didn't go look. Fear doesn't always lie to you. Sometimes it's an old friend with good advice. Not yet, not now. Around 2 a.m., an emergency broadcast went out on AM radio. I tuned the library's little tabletop to KFI 640 because every kid in this part of town knows to go there when things go wrong. A voice read a county statement that sounded like a document in a binder pretending to be a human. Civil order, shelter, avoid travel, cooperate with law enforcement. Then a quieter voice came on that sounded like an engineer who had slept in the studio before and would sleep there again. He told us the freeway closures one by one. He told us that Dodger Stadium was staging ambulances. He told us to breathe, and I did. Hour 12:18. Los Angeles looks like a movie at dawn even when there's no camera. The hills make long shadows, and the cloud ceiling, when there is one, makes the light a color you can't name. I watched the courtyard go grey to pearl to white and almost convinced myself I'd overreacted. Then someone banged 3 times on the admin wing door and shouted, "Open!" with a voice that had both words and something else in it. The way people talk when they're sleepwalking and don't know their own tones. I stayed away from the windows. The person on the other side kept slapping the glass. You can hear palm flesh in a flat impact better than you think. There's a clap to it, unlike a fist. The door didn't move. I waited until the voice went hoarse a row, and then stopped, and then I waited more. I counted to 600 slowly, and then I counted again. I wrote down the hour on a piece of lined paper, because the thing I feared most was losing the thread of time. The lined paper became a log. At 7:40 a.m., my friend Nick texted, "My dad says, don't go to Kaiser. There's a crowd and it's bad. You at home?" I typed, "Library safe. Tell everyone to stay inside." He responded with a string of expletives. "Then I can come get you." I told him no. But in 2 hours, he texted me a picture of the Hyperion Bridge out of commission. A city truck angled across like a boast. A crowd stopped before it with faces turned up, the river gleaming a dirty silver below. I used to think bridges meant you could always get across. Turns out they also make it very simple to stop people from doing exactly that. I checked the theatre again. The stage was my comfort place because it made me feel like I could control what people see. I pulled a black drape halfway across the proscenium and cut the bits of street view that would let anyone out there see movement in here. I found a box of headsets, the good ones, with coiled cables, and I clipped one to my shoulder and routed the cable into my hoodie so it didn't catch on a door or knob at a bad time. Small things matter in a maze. In the nurse's office, a red backpack with a white cross stenkled on the side sat on a high shelf. Inside, emergency blankets, a flashlight, a glow stick, a small loud whistle, a basic first triage sheet with coloured tags. I left it as intact as I could, only moving the whistle to my pocket. A radio chirped somewhere on campus. A stray unit on scan catching a burst from who knows where. I resisted the urge to pick up the CP200 and press the PTT just to hear another live person. You don't transmit unless you know who you're talking to. You don't tell anyone you're alone unless you mean to tell everyone. Around 10 o'clock, I heard footsteps coming up the ramp by the stew. Dense door, slow, heavy, then lighter, as if the person were adjusting how their feet understood the incline. I peeked through a sliver by the blinds and saw a woman in a blouse, now stained, hair stuck to her face, eyes wild in the way of someone overheated and beyond their own threshold. She stopped at the window, as if she knew each classroom had a soul inside, but she didn't focus. She turned, saw the reflection of herself in the glass, and leaned toward it until her forehead touched the pane with a hollow clunk. There was saliva or sweat there, and it streaked down the glass, and then she moved on. And I don't know why that detail sticks, except that it made her painfully real. There are stories where the people outside become faceless, and your fear can be clean. This wasn't that story. My mum's last text of the morning, "I see you converted step-down rooms to isolation. It's crowded. Tell me 3 things you can see, 2 you can hear, 1 you can smell. It's a grounding game." She makes me play when my brain tries to scramble itself before a test. I texted back, "I can see the quad, the flag, the second-floor railing by science. I can hear a helicopter. Shoes on concrete. I can smell dust." She sent a heart. Then turn off bells. Remember, sprinklers run zones. The bells, right? If power held and the clock controller hadn't reset to default, we were fine. If it had, the schedule might try to ring on the hour, even without class. I didn't want that. Noise was a kind of spotlight. I walked to the admin wing and tried a door to the inside hallway. It was closed and locked as it should be. I looked through the glass at the wall where a metal box sat with a ribbon of LEDs and a tiny LCD. The box was inside. I was outside. I accepted that sometimes smart plans have to be replaced with humble ones. I walked the loop around to a side office and found another controller. This one inside a small custodial closet that had been left open in the rush. On the face of the controller were 3 buttons, up-down menu, below a tag with the vendor's number, above the current time in blinking digits, and a line that read, Bell Inhibit. Whoever ran this place in those last minutes had done what needed doing and had spared me needing to do it. I whispered thank you to a person I would someday hug if we all got to be people again. You're 18? 24. By late morning, the city's talk had sharpened. On AM radio, a measured voice that had been reading lists now read warnings. On the scanner app, channels that used to fill with traffic stops and shoplifts sold in haste shifted to nothing but priority. Units on Code 3, requests to clear intersections, one call after another for containment that never arrived. The words I couldn't say in my head were now being said aloud by men and women who don't speak that way without orders. Infected influx. Public safety concern church. I heated water in the culinary classroom kettles and made ramen because calories and sodium count when you're living out of a backpack schedule. The culinary lab is a showpiece, stainless, organized. Rows of gas burners under hoods that could swallow a fog bank. Out the window there you can see the hills that hold the Griffith Observatory at one end and 1,000 tiny apartments at the other. Smoke was darker in that slice of sky and drifting, and I shut the window. I hoarded the ramen seasoning packets like they were currency and saved the noodles. I ate a peach from a 10 can, and it tasted like a normal day in middle school. At 1, a knock came at the cafeteria loading door, not a slap like the infected give a surface when hands don't know what to do. A 3 tap in a rhythm almost polite. I held still, the steam from the kettle ghosting the window glass, and waited. The knock came again, a voice low and human, and reined in near its center. "Anyone in there?" I crouched, moved to the side of the windows. "Ow!" and risked a look through a paper-thin slice. A man stood with his back to the hillside, one arm held against his ribs like he'd fallen hard. He wore a polo embroidered Rams athletics and a pair of track pants streaked with a long grey smudge, like contact with a painted wall. "Coach Lawson, he's not my coach. I run cables, not laps, but he knows my name. When I held a cable for him in the gym once during a pep rally, he'd said, 'Good hands, Alvarez.' Now, he leaned against the masonry and breathed through his teeth and tried not to look to the street, because the street is where the rule about not making noise has to be broken if you want to say you're alive. "Coach," I said low through the door. I didn't open it. "Not yet. It's Mateo. You're Lawson, right?" He laughed once under his breath, unless the world scraped off that label. "Yeah." He kept his voice a thread. "I know what we tell kids." "Is someone in there?" "I am." I hesitated, then went with the decisions I was making in real time. "Are you sick?" He shook his head once, an efficient no. "Ankles," he said, as if that explained every symptom he preferred to have. "Got forced out of my place on Myra. People got weird in the stairwell, went down, got up, came this way. I can keep moving, but slower." He glanced down the driveway. "I can pass by, but if there's a bottle of water, you can slide out." That would I opened the door, not wide enough to hand him a bottle and keep the geometry on my side. He took it and drank like a man who knows how to stay just this side of gulping. "You okay?" he said, voice human again now that there was someone to aim it at. "I'm okay," I said. "Library is my spot. Doors are good. Bells are off." "You did the bells?" he asked. and something like approval passed through the way he had his jaw set. "No," I said, a little proud, a little sheepish. "Somebody did before me," I pointed with my chin toward admin. "We have competent adults." We both tried on a small smile. It fit for a second. It didn't last. "I need to get to Atwater," he said. "My daughter's." "At her mum's. I thought I'd cut by Marshall in the bridge on Los Feliz." But he tilted his head the way people tilt it when they've seen the bridge become a wall. "Anyway, I should keep moving. Take this," I said, and gave him a bandage wrap from my bag. "It's clean. You can return it to the nurse's office if we ever do lost and found again." He took it in the way men take gifts from boys. When the boy has a man task, and the man recognizes it. "You need anything?" he asked. I should have said no. In a normal year, you don't ask for help from a coach you're not officially under. But this wasn't a normal year, and the line between adult and not has a way of sliding when the only rule is take care. If you see security, tell them someone's in library. I said, if you see anyone who looks burned out in their eyes, don't bring them. If you see my mum, Kaiser, I added, knowing how tall an order that was, tell her bells are off. I'll tell anyone who will listen, he said. He started to step away, then stopped. Alvarez, he said, lock this behind me. He moved into the sunlight like it would cure something, and then he was down the loading ramp and along the fence, body held in that careful, braced way you walk. When one joint has decided to be the weak link, he reached the corner by the student lot and froze. From St. George, a tight knot of figures came in that too fast, not quite run. Step patterns out of rhythm, heads angled wrong. He flattened into shadow, and I shut the cafeteria door and killed every light and made the building again into what buildings are for holding. For 30 minutes I listened, propped against the door, counting steps and trying to pass voices from the scrape of shoes. Every cell in my body wanted to lift the handle, look out, and signal Coach Lawson to circle back. But the first rule beat out the second one, and I kept still. When the sounds moved on and then moved further on and then was swallowed by the bigger sound of panic made background, I breathed. Again, hour 24:30. By evening of the second day, I was good at moving quietly. There's a way to roll the soles of your shoes so you don't slap in a hallway. There's a way to let a door latch by guiding it between thumb and first finger so it doesn't catch and click. I kept to those micro-disciplines like I'd trained for them. You do the small things right to survive the large. At 6:00 p.m., sun slipped toward the hills and the wind shifted from the ocean. I cracked the library window an inch to bleed some heat, then slid it shut when smoke turned the light honey-colored. In the auditorium, I climbed the ladder to the catwalk, popped the access hatch onto the roof, and took one look out at Los Feliz and Silver Lake and all the way downtown toward the cluster of towers with their lights half out. LA under smoke is a strange living map. Emergency beacons at certain intersections, cars abandoned at predictable choke points. The silver smear of the reservoir like an eye. From here the campus felt like an island with a sea wall only a few feet high, enough to keep the normal tide out. Not enough if the sea decided to argue. I didn't make signals, I didn't wave. I watched one CHP helicopter crab sideways and flare, then slip north. I watched a convoy of city trucks, water and power, if the decal gleam meant anything, line up along Glendale in a formation that looked like a thought. I counted columns of smoke. I listened. Like listening was something I was going to be graded on. Back inside, I found the AED cabinet and checked the pad's expiration dates like I knew what to do if a heart asked me to try. The AED chirped once in its cradle like a bird complaining. In the science prep room, I closed the main gas shutoff because I didn't want surprises in a lab that's CTE, mounted on kids to follow tiny rules. In custodial storage, I found a box fan and a roll of that blue painter's tape that forgives you. I labelled the library door Lib HQ to make myself laugh and to make a stranger, if one ever came, understand where not to slam. I wore the whistle around my neck because it's a way to call help without calling words, and because a whistle is older than a phone, and sometimes you trust what's old more. Hour 30:36. At 2:00 a.m., bells rang far away. Another school that hadn't had a competent adult stay to kill the schedule. The sound travelled the way birdsong travels in an empty canyon. It drew motion. I watched from the dark as figures in the street altered course like they had caught a scent. We think of these things as stories about sight. They weren't. Sound ruled everything after the first day. The city's quiet made the smallest scrape into a press release. A little after 3, a small group approached the gate on Tracy. They walked like a group walks when they've been together 12 hours and nobody slept. Tight coil, no wasted space. Steps that try to argue with friction. One of them held a flashlight low. Another held a jacket wrapped around their arm like a guard. The one in front came up on the metal and tried to climb without making noise and failed because chain link is a snare for noise. I wanted to run and open. For a second, I was sure the right thing to do was ignore every rule, swing the gate, and let them flood through the way water knows how to flood. Then one of them dragged a leg in that offbeat way. Another turned head too sharply, as if trying to unstick it. I realized the math. An open gate lets everyone in. I found the PA microphone in the main office and considered it. The speakers, those sad square tiles, would throw my voice into the quad, then onto the street. It would save some and risk all. I let the mic hang. Quiet one. One of them saw me through the glass. They made a sound, half plea, half demand. The group turned as one and faced me across. The lumpy yard, and I felt like prey in a zoo that's been misdesigned. And the animals have learned. They moved away after a time that felt much longer than it was. They found a hydrant at the corner where some good soul had hung a wrench years ago with a note for firefighters only and pulled it. And the spray came like laughter until someone in the knot stuck their face into the water and stayed. I closed the blinds. Hour 36:42. Around mid-morning on the third day, the power dipped and hummed and then held. The clocks blinked and resettled. The library's computer screens asleep in their black lit and showed the district wallpaper as if for a moment the world had remembered how to be. Some buildings on the hill lost their lights, some didn't. I wondered about the grid. How water and power triages a city this big, when the list of what's urgent is longer than what's not. I used daylight to go on supply run to the far end of campus where the track meets the small gym. The PE supply room was open. A well of soccer balls and a dusty rack of old equipment manuals. Tucked on a shelf, a small first aid kit, better tape, decent shears. I took just the tape. In the gym office, I found an old metal whistle and laughed at my redundancy. On the bulletin board, the spring tournament brackets frozen before they'd finished. Names I knew. My own name up on a sign for the AV crew. Tech call 06:00 Saturday, like a telegraph from a country I'd visited and left. When I came out, I heard the locker room shower running even though the water pressure had started to drop everywhere else. It's a striking sound, wasteful and luxurious in a crisis. I didn't go in. The idea of a person behind the steam curtain needing help or not needing the kind I could offer was a boundary I wasn't ready to cross alone. And I backed away and left the door and the running water to a city that had 1,000 small leaks, which felt tragic at first and then felt like the only way we could keep pretending normal existed within a mile of any one of us. Back in the library, I wrote a note to future me on lined paper. You can survive this if you stay small. Eat, water, quiet, sleep. Hour 42:48. Toward dusk, a column of smoke rose from the direction of the 5. The freeway hum was a blanket stripped away. Without it, individual cars stood out like stitches undone. From the roof hatch, I watched a few blocks to the east glow orange for a minute, then settled back into grey. The wind shifted and brought a scent like metal and rain on hot asphalt, and I felt grateful for the N95 because the smoke made my throat feel like paper. On AM radio, a voice I recognized from late-night road trips, the host who reads long ads for mattresses like he's confessing, turned serious and asked people to check on elderly neighbors after the second day. He told them to do it from a distance, to leave water by doors, and to sing a few bars of any song before entering a room so the person inside had time to make their face ready to see another face. I listened for a long time and wished I had a neighbor in here. Then I took the index cards from behind the librarian's desk and wrote out a schedule. Minute tasks in 20-minute blocks, because when the planet gets too big, you make the room just small enough. I also started talking to the building. It's embarrassing to admit, but important to log. I thanked doors when they closed. Politely, I told the whiteboard it was doing a great job guarding. I told the stage drapes they were a good curtain. In return, the building told me what buildings tell the people who stay. If you listen, I will hold. If you stop listening, you will turn me into a bad idea. At around 9:00 p.m., the cafeteria freezer kicked off with a relay click and didn't kick back on. I waited. It stayed quiet. The cold would hold a while. Things don't thaw in a blink. Still, it felt like another part of the city was moving one square at a time from light to dark. I took 2 more flats of water from the cafeteria to the library and pushed the cart through shadows. Crossing the quad felt like crossing open water, and I kept my head down. The stars were visible in a way they usually aren't this close to the glow, and their presence made everything more unreal, like a film that had shot one too many takes and then burned the best one in the lab by mistake. Hour 48:52. Sometime in that last stretch, my phone battery dipped to 20% and stayed there. I rotated it off and only flicked it on in scheduled burst to check messages, then back into airplane mode. Lena had sent 3 pictures of the empty sidewalks along Sunset that morning. A minute later, she wrote, "Going to Glendale to my aunt's." I didn't reply, not because I didn't want to, but because talking had become a resource like water. At 4:00 a.m., a siren approached on St. George and stopped. Not a police siren, one of those smaller 2-tone cries, like an alarm company van or something from Public Works. The engine idled, a door opened sharply, then closed. Footsteps, 2 people speaking low. One voice said, "Here," with a competence that made me want to stand and salute. Another said something about chain tension, metal clanked tools. After a minute, the siren whooped once and the vehicle moved on, leaving the gate exactly as before, but somehow made sturdier by the fact that someone had seen it and had a job a person could still do. My head got crowded with 2 versions of LA. 1, the city of corridors, most of them empty. 2, the city of workers still moving through their assignments even when the assignments had become prayers. At dawn, the sky went steel blue and then softened. A pair of crows argued on the roof over the theatre's fly gallery, making a racket like a family dispute. The flag on the main pole hung limp in the still air. I brewed tea in the culinary lab, and it tasted better than tea brewed any other time in my life. I wrote in the log, "Do not go loud, you're not lost, you're waiting inside a map." Hour 52:55. Here's how the last hours condensed: motion, noise, smoke, and then the purest quiet I'd heard since the first minute. It was a quiet made of intention, not absence. At 9:05 a.m., a convoy of city vehicles crept along Glendale Boulevard, white pickups with hazard lights blinking, trucks with toolboxes, 2 large dump trucks, 1 flatbed with stacks of thick temporary fencing. Behind them, an LAPD unit with its light bar dark, and behind that a sheriff's SUV with the rear hatch half op. The vehicles moved like a group crossing ice on a lake. I watched from the roof hatch with my head barely above the line, and I thought I could smell diesel from here. They turned at Rowena and then again at Hyperion, and I lost them behind the buildings. 10 minutes later, new noises, boots on concrete, the metallic squeal of chain link being tensioned tighter, the clack-clack of small padlocks. A voice called for more picks and another for banding. On the St. George side, an officer, utility belt, calm stance, hand at his radio, stood and scanned the street the way you do when you've been trained to put your body between a thing and a place. I wanted to cool down. I didn't. I waited. They worked the perimeter like touring texts, checking their rigging. Zip, click, clack. And then at the main gate, 4 people with uniforms, but not the kind that say anything dramatic. Public Works, I think, wrestled a new section of temporary fencing into place, making the school into a tighter envelope. They didn't try to go in. They expressed no curiosity about whether anyone might be inside. They acted like this was a box in a warehouse that needed its tape replaced. I watched with a relief so intense it made my eyes water. Someone was putting boundary back into the world. Only then did I make a sign on the back of one of the giant poster boards from the art room, the kind we use for Spirit Week. I wrote with thick strokes, alone, safe, water, waiting. I held it up above the theatre parapet and waved it side to side like a metronome set to 60. The officer on St. George turned his head slowly. He looked up. He saw me. He raised a hand in an unmistakable gesture. Stay. He tapped his radio mic, spoke, and then lifted an index finger like 1 minute. That minute stretched in it. I thought about the first knock and the smell of peaches and Coach Lawson's wrapped ankle, and my mother in a room with too much noise, too little air, telling people to list 3 things they could see. I thought of the bells that didn't ring because someone before me had done their job when the day still wore a normal face. Then a second officer, this one with a clipboard and a vest with reflective stripes, stepped into view where I could see him without exposing myself. He looked up and read the sign and nodded once, just a nod, not a promise, and wrote something on his page. He pointed toward the back of the campus where the hillside falls toward the staff lot, and tapped his watch and held up 5 fingers. I understood him perfectly. 5 hours or 5 minutes? No context, 5 hours. It matched the way convoys move. It matched the slow math of a city who is trying to touch every place once before it doubles back. He patted the gate, made a show of dragging a hand along the new chain to tell me it was better now than before, then lifted his hand again in the same universal sign for wait. And then the convoy moved on, the locks shivering as the trucks passed, the hazard lights winking their polite language. I held my sign above the parapet until my arms shook. I lowered it, folded it, tucked it behind the stage curtain, like it belonged in props. I went to the library and wrote in my log, 55th hour, contact with city. Stay, eat, water, quiet, sleep if you can, listen. Then I sat in the chair by the window where I could see the quad and the student store and the silly mural with our mascot and the world beyond the fence that had not forgotten us. I thought about what I would say on a night years from now when someone asked what I did the first days. I would say I stayed small. I listened. I took care of a building because a building was what I had. I didn't know if it would be another 5 hours or 5 more days. I didn't know if the officer's fingers had meant anything beyond the fact that he still had all 5. I didn't know whether my mum would walk across the quad with her badge and the smile she uses to make people breathe. But I knew with a certainty, born from the way a door feels when it closes all the way and catches, that I had already survived something. Not the whole thing, not the endless thing, but the first 55 hours, which is the length of the bridge that gets you from panic to a plan. So I wrote the plan more clearly. I taped it to the library desk. I ate half a granola bar, because saving half is as good as hope sometimes. I drank water. I adjusted the blue tape on the door. I listened. I told the building it had done well and that I would keep listening if it kept holding. G. And then I breathed in time with a city learning new rhythms and waited for the sound of boots at the door and a voice that would make a different kind of promise. We're here. We're going to open this carefully. You did the right thing by staying. Until then, I stayed where I was in the heart of a campus that had become a ship. And I kept time with the slow, deliberate beats of a city that, despite everything, despite the smoke and the broken bridges and the lights blinking at odd intervals, still belonged to us and would again, one careful, quiet hour at a time. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams.